Welcome to Successful Parenting, where we, Jackie Rue and Robin Choquette, share practical skills for families to build resilience and healthy connections. As practicing professionals and parents ourselves, we hope this podcast is a resource for parents to grow, reflect, and learn more about themselves and their children. Our approach is simple, tangible, and most importantly, we lead with compassion for the integrity of the families we serve. This podcast should not be taken as medical advice and is intended for informational purposes only. We love our work, and we can't wait to watch families gain confidence and open themselves up to new ways of successful parenting. Hello, Jackie.
Hi, Robin.
How are things going for you this week?
They're going pretty good.
Good for you.
Yeah, I know we've got to chat several times and talking about the beginning of the school year and the excitement about just kind of getting back into the swing of things. So it's a fun time of year for me.
This week has been chaotic for me. Gosh. And it seems like every client I'm talking to, they're kind of in the same place. Everyone has got, I think it's like allergies. They're not feeling great. And so I'm hearing that. And then it just seems like kind of going sideways every step you take. Are you feeling that this week? Or is it just the Kansas people? The Illinois people I still talk to are saying the same thing. It's kind of chaotic this week.
You know, I anticipate things pretty well, and I know what to expect from this time of the year because for me, it's my busiest and it's the same every year. So I don't necessarily have a hard time with it because I expect it. I know it's going to be a lot of schools reach out to me this time of year for consultation and presentations. And so I know it's very busy. I anticipate it. And I kind of get excited with all of it. And so for me, it's not so tough. And again, I love fall. You know, it's interesting. I think sometimes it's a mindset shift too. I think for so many, just getting back into a different routine, you know, going from summer, getting the kids back in a routine can be stressful. So I would say this is the one time a year that because I expect it, it doesn't impact me in a negative way. I'm excited.
Yeah, I get that. I think you're right on that. The more that we can get structured and anticipate, it's not like it's going to be perfect and everything is right on. But if we're ready to handle it and kind of have that plan of how do we handle what we don't know, right, is so important. And this kind of goes right into what we're going to be talking about today. Our expert, her name is Dayna Abraham, and I got connected with her, Jackie, from someone that I know in Naperville, Illinois. And they said, hey, I really think Dayna would be a great guest on your podcast. And so I reached out and we were able to make it happen. So I'm super excited to have this conversation today. Let me tell you a little bit about Dayna. She's a best-selling author of Calm the Chaos, a fail-proof roadmap for parenting, even in the most challenging kids, as a national board-certified educator, and she is a parent of 3 neurodivergent children. She also ADHD, and she brings a unique and out-of-the-box perspective to parents raising kids in the modern world. Sounds like she's right up our alley, right,
Yeah,
Jackie?
for sure.
Yeah. Through her compassionate framework, Calm the Chaos, she has helped millions of desperate parents around the world find peace and meet their children where they are at when conventional parenting tools have failed them. And we talk about that a lot, right? Just do X, Y, and Z. Well, that doesn't always work. So I love what she talks about, and we're going to be able to have a conversation with her and talk about her new book, Calm the Chaos. Welcome, Dayna.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, we are just pleased and thank you and grateful for you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and have this conversation.
Of course. I'm a little jealous of Jackie talking about fall because I'm in Arkansas and it is still like 98 degrees outside. So we won't see fall for another month or two.
It's like chilly today. I mean, it's supposed to be in the 70s this weekend. We've had a heat wave here, Dayna, so I'm welcoming it because we had 80s, some 90s. It was a pretty hot summer, and I love, like, my perfect temperature is 60s and sunny, and so I love fall.
I love fall in Illinois too, so I'm just missing that just a little bit.
Yes. Well, Dayna, why don't you kind of tell us about you and your journey in becoming an author? This isn't your first book. So kind of tell us about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. So I started out as you said earlier, an educator in Chicago public schools, taught for 12 years. My favorite kiddos were the kids that came with a very long paper trail behind them. The ones that the teachers would talk about in the teacher's lounge, the parents would drop them off with their heads hung low. And honestly, the kids knew it too, right? They knew that they were talked about and that they struggled and they weren't like all the other kids, but those were my absolute favorites because I knew that they had so much more to offer that a lot of people weren't seeing. And I really loved getting to know them and kind of digging under the surface. I think because I had also grown up kind of feeling out of the box, feeling different than my surroundings, and being a sibling of a brother who's bipolar, I was on the receiving end of a lot of his aggressive attacks. And so I had to learn at a very early age how to deal with chaos and how to deal with big explosive meltdowns. And so taking that into the classroom, it just felt natural. So when I became a parent, I thought I had this whole parenting gig figured out. Like, I'm going to be the world's best parent ever. I hear you laughing. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what happened.
because I'm only imagining what it was when you were like, okay, I
This
don't.
is not, not what I expected. So yeah, the universe, God, whatever it is you believe in, gave me a boy who was going to teach me all the things I didn't know about life and about parenting and education. And so for the first 7 years, it was really difficult. We kind of tried all different things. He was kicked out of preschool, kindergarten. By second grade, he was suspended more days than he was in school. I mean, he just really had a difficult time in school. And so I ended up quitting teaching, coming home to stay with him. We actually moved to Naperville from Chicago because it was quieter in the suburbs. And he was so attuned to all the noises and sounds of the city that just removing him from the city sounds really helped calm him quite a bit. So that was actually the first reason we moved out there. And during that time, I really just had to go back to the basics, had to figure out what was going on, how to understand him. And as I started figuring out what was working, what wasn't, I started sharing that online because everything else online felt so picture perfect. It felt like, do this and everything will be great. Here's your secret tip and then everything will be perfect. And that was not happening in my house. And so I needed to know I wasn't alone. And that's when I started building an online community that grew to millions. And I started teaching what I was learning and what I was figuring out in my own family with other families. And that's kind of how we got to where we are today with the Calm the Chaos book. It is the culmination of the last 10 years of learning, teaching, navigating life through the ups and downs.
Well, and in your book, I know you talk about your experiences and being a parent of 3 neurodivergent children and having ADHD yourself. What has helped you in your parenting and just to be able to support your children in a different way?
So I think one of the first things that became really clear to me is that it wasn't a one size fits all solution. That, there's a lot of advice out there that makes you feel like if you just do this, then everything will fall in line. And there's a lot of books even that when you get to the end of the book, it says, if this doesn't work, you either A, did it wrong, or B, something must be terribly wrong with your kid. And that just never really sat well with me. And so one of the biggest things that I realized, it's not just being more connected, or it's not just knowing what's under the surface. There's more to the picture than just this one tip or trick. And it's more of understanding the bigger picture and holistic view of what are the principles that we know based on the latest research, the latest science. Then how can I couple that with what I already know about myself, about my child, about our surroundings and environment? And how can I kind of bridge those two together to create parenting that works uniquely for my kid and uniquely for our family?
Wow. So great. I love it. Well, you have a website, Lemon Lime Adventures, correct?
Yes. Yeah. That's where it all started. The blog is where it started.
Oh, okay. And there you talk about, creating the family you always wanted. Tell us a little bit how you guide families into that space and, having parents and families to recognize the importance of just, letting go of that perfectionism, letting go of it has to look a certain way. And that's not easy. Right? Because
No.
as you talked about the social media influences, our friends, our families, all of those around us are giving us all of this great advice, and it can get so confusing, make us feel kind of bad for what we're trying to do and where our family is going. So kind of give us, what are some of your thoughts on that and help us
Yeah.
understand?
So one of the things that I have figured out is that it's, like I said before, it's not just this one thing. I call this the framework. So there are 4 key elements that if you keep these in mind, then you can use them for any challenging situation that you're going through with your kids, with your partner, at work, whatever it is that you're kind of dealing with. But we always start with the family. But the first piece is connection, and really seeing and understanding and accepting the other person who you're involved with, that you're struggling with. And so that does involve accepting the kid that you have in front of you, not the kid that society tells you should have, not who your in-laws are telling you should have, but who you actually ended up with. The next piece is understanding. And that's really looking under the surface at what's going on instead of taking everything at face value and assuming that your kid, your spouse, your partner, whoever it is doing the thing they're doing to get under your skin or to go against you. There's always some reason for the challenge, for the behavior. And so the more that we can unravel that, the more empathy we can have and the more we can problem solve and create solutions that actually work. Which brings us to the third piece, which is empowerment. A lot of times it's this idea of the parent is in charge and the kids just have to listen. But if we can actually take it from a collaborative approach and we can create plans that get everyone's needs met, not just the kids, not just the adults, but really creating an environment where everyone can thrive, building the skills that the kids need, building the skills we need to be able to be successful, then we don't have to worry so much about what everyone else is suggesting for us because we can see that our plans are working for our kids and they're moving our kids forward and helping them be successful in whatever it is they're doing. And then the very last piece, the piece that gets forgotten a lot, is the you piece. So that is like you as the parent and your own perception, your own thoughts, your own mindset. And so you mentioned like all these judgments and social media and all of the stuff coming in and that overwhelm. And one thing we know is that when stress goes up, executive functioning skills go down. So your ability to do the things we do in life go down. And so as parents, we have to be able to be that calm in the center of the storm. We have to be able to swap our thoughts. So instead of catastrophizing the thing that's happening in front of us, being able to minimize that and be able to see the progress, the small wins, instead of, looking for it going from point A to Z overnight, we can celebrate the fact that we went from A to A.1. So those are some of the pieces. And then the last thing is, that's our framework. So connection, understanding, empowerment with you at the center. And you can use those 4 elements for any plan or strategy that you're coming up with your kids. But when I talk about that with parents, it can feel really overwhelming, especially at the start of school, like guys were talking about at the beginning, when there's a new transition, when there's a lot of stress. And so what we realized is that there's these 5 very distinct stages that parents go through. You don't magically get a family that works together. And you can't start with getting ahead and being preemptive. You have to start by riding the storm and being able to hunker down, being able to stay calm during the worst moments, being able to rebuild your own time and energy reserves so that when something happens, you're not depleted and unable to remain calm. And then having a plan for what to do and say in the heat of the moment that diffuses the situation without adding more fuel to the fire.
I love that. I mean, I love how you said, especially the role that we can play as parents, as adults. I think it makes such a big difference in how the child experiences, even frustration, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think experiencing frustration can be huge for some parents and families, as well as for the children, right? Because the children, and I always say to parents, if you walk in the room and your child's like putting their hands on their ears or they're like running away from you or, they look stressed when you're talking to them, kind of look at, what's going on in that dynamic. And how do you help calm with them?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions for our listeners on managing and reducing the impact of frustration on the family just overall?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's some of the stuff that we just talked about, but in that ride the storm stage, one of the things that I teach parents is to start out with a plan that involves not just their own ability to remain calm, but also the signals they're sending from their body. So I'll walk you through a couple of these things. So the U piece in that plan is something I call stop, breathe, anchor, which is that pause that we've all heard about, that we know is so important, but a lot of times we don't know how to access it, especially if we've been triggered by a loud noise, if we've been triggered by our kids not listening to us, if we're being set off because it feels like our kids are pushing our buttons. We need something that reminds our own brain and nervous system, hey, you're safe. Your kid's not the bear. They're not coming to attack you. You're going to make it through this. And so having that plan ahead of time and saying, okay, when all hell breaks loose, I'm going to plant my feet in the ground. I'm going to take a big deep breath. And then I'm going to remember this anchor, this memory. Just yesterday, a picture came up and a video came up on my Facebook memories. And it was of my 18-year-old, and he's singing Five Little Monkeys. And it was so freaking adorable. He was like 3 years old. And I sent it to my husband and I said, this is our new anchor for when he is really struggling as an 18-year-old. We have to remember this kid is still inside of there. And so sometimes it's a memory, sometimes it's a phrase, sometimes it's something like very physical that you can touch and feel. But having something that actually grounds us physically or mentally before entering a situation is so incredibly important, so that it doesn't ripple into the rest of the family, because our family is going to take our lead. They are going to notice our energy. And if we're unable to remain calm, if we're struggling with that, then it is going to, like I said, ripple into everybody else.
Yeah.
The second piece of that is what I was saying about the signals. So, you said earlier, when you walk into a room and you see the kids and they're putting their hands over their ears or they're running away, we can take that as a signal and we can notice the clues and say, okay, what is the dynamic happening here? But we can also stop and pay attention to our own body. If either one of you have ever walked into a room when, two people are arguing and they just stopped arguing before you walked in the room, you can cut the tension with a knife, right?
Yes.
Like you can feel that energy coming off of them, even if they're not saying anything. And our kids are the same way, especially our kids that struggle maybe more than other kids, is they might be more perceptive to that sensation, to that energy, to your emotions. And they're not sure how to interpret it. And so we can do what I call a body scan, where you're looking from the head down, kind of like a laser in a movie. You're just like and scanning your body and looking, are your eyes scrunched? Is your jaw tight? Are your shoulders raised? Are you huffing and puffing? Is your body big? And by swapping your movements and your body language, you are now swapping the signals that you're sending your kid in that really stressful moment, which again is going to ripple into that frustration and the rest of the signals the rest of the family is getting. And it's going to reduce that frustration on the rest of the family.
I like it.
I like that too.
Yeah, the body scan. And I talk a lot about that. It's so interesting as you're talking about that, of really understanding what's going on and what you're putting out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much going for families right now. They're experiencing so much. What are the trends? Are you seeing obstacles that you're seeing, families really face today?
I'm seeing a lot of Okay, so it's a couple of things. I'm seeing what seems to be more struggles, but what I actually think it is I think that the pandemic allowed us permission to talk about our struggles more, because as a society, we all went through something pretty traumatic, something really big. And so now it's like, hey, my kid isn't wanting to go to school. Their anxiety is at an all-time high. I'm seeing a lot of that. I'm seeing a lot of struggles with electronics, because we had 2 years of our kids being on electronics and now trying to come out of that. I'm seeing families struggling with kids and their self-talk, their negative self-talk and self-harming, and this pressure that kids are putting on themselves. I'm also seeing more, and this is a good thing, more awareness of differences and neurodiversity, and realizing that not all children are the same, but then feeling really overwhelmed with all the information out there. And sometimes these very opposing sides to, well, don't do this, well, you should do this. And that overwhelm and stress that then gets placed on the parents, feeling like, well, am I doing this right? Am I failing my kid? I don't want to ruin my kid. And I see a lot of self-doubt and a lot of shame and judgment being placed on parents.
Yeah. I hear a lot about that. We have a lot of conversations about that in general, just about how parents feel. And we've talked about this on other episodes. And even, when families have to go to meetings at the school and things like that, not really knowing how to navigate or what's their role. And, I think a lot of times families feel embarrassed. I agree with everything that you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you felt that too, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, here I was an educator in Chicago Public Schools, someone who actually would do presentations for other teachers. So I was known in the district. And then my son is the one that I'm getting called to school every day. I'm having to leave my job. I'm having to leave school early and all these things. And my kid's getting suspensions and in-school suspensions. And I walk in the building and they're like, oh, it's you. You're his parent. Well, that's a surprise. Like, I'm surprised you can't solve this. I'm surprised you can't fix this. So that shame, that judgment. And then as my son got older, I found I wouldn't even tell people I had this education background because I didn't want them to know, because that just felt like adding even more shame and judgment on the fact that we were struggling. When what I have realized is just how many people are struggling. Sometimes the schools have to make sure that they are protecting every family that they speak with. So I get where it comes from, right? That we, as schools, we want to make sure that we are speaking to each parent individually. And so we're not telling them about the other kids that are struggling. And we're doing that to keep kids safe, keep kids in privacy. But at the same time, then parents are led to believe that their kid is the only one struggling, that their kid is the only one that can't sit still in class, that is refusing to come to school, that is touching other kids, when it's a much bigger, larger problem and way more common than sometimes as parents we're led to believe.
Mm-hmm. Are there any things that you would say that you feel like strategies that family are using that you would say like not to use or to use that can be helpful?
Yeah, I think that when we as parents, when we approach solutions and strategies from a place of fear, we're never going to come out with the outcome that we want. We might get a short-term result, but we're not going to get the long-term outcome that we want and the lifelong change that we want. So that is one of the first things. And I talked about that at the beginning, that it's not just a strategy or not just one piece. We have to have that perception shift as well. So one strategy that has helped tons of parents is being able to swap their own thoughts. So instead of seeing their kids as always hitting their brother or never listening or constantly being defiant, when they can swap that and they can find proof of the opposite, when they can focus on the things that are working instead of trying to kind of overhaul everything. I see a lot of parents, they go from one technique or one system to another really quickly. And I think that that comes from this like instant gratification world we live in this, Amazon Prime society. And I don't think you can Amazon Prime your parenting.
Right.
Like, I think that you have to, you create a plan, you work through it, and then we don't throw it out when it doesn't work. We go back and we debrief it and say, okay, what worked? What didn't? What is one small change I can make? And when we focus on those tiny pieces of progress, that's when we're going to start to see change with our kids. And at first, it's going to feel really small, like nothing's changing. But then 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, you could have a radically different relationship with your kids because you're continuing to make those small, tiny tweaks. As long as you're staying connected, you're focusing on getting to the root of what is really going on, and then you're working together collaboratively with your kids, with the family, with the teachers to create plans that meet the needs of everyone, then you're going to see progress forward.
Mm-hmm. I use and I don't know, being from the South, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Absolutely.
Yes, that is one that we talk a lot about. You speak a lot of the same language I feel like Jackie and I talk about. And so it feels like a natural connection for all of us here. We talk a lot about families connecting and finding those small ways and the importance of that and how that creates that sense of safety, that community. It really helps us to know that we're together, even if it seems like it's going left on us, we're all still together going through this. What are some ways that you help families to connect more?
Oh, I love this one. So I think connection is misunderstood by a lot of parents. I think that especially in this very busy world that we live in, it adds more stress and more overwhelm to the list of shoulds, the things we should be doing or could be doing, because we feel like it means that we need to have everybody's sitting at the kitchen table. It means that we need to have family game nights. It means that we need to go on hikes together as a family. We need to ride our bikes together as a family. All those things are fantastic, but there are ways that we can connect without doing these grand gestures. And it goes all the way back to what I said about that body scan. We can connect with our body language. We can connect with the words that come out of our mouth. An example, I have a teenager, I have two now, and I have to be very, very cognizant of what my interactions with my teenagers are because they are few and far between at this age right now. And so when I am connecting with them or when I am interacting with them, I want to make sure that when I open the door to their room, I'm saying, hey, buddy, nice to see you today. What are you working on? Oh, cool. What game are you playing? Awesome. And I leave the room instead of walking in and going, oh my gosh, there's trash everywhere. I asked you to clean this up. Don't forget to do this. Don't forget about that. When are you going to do this? It's time to do that. And this like very naggy, even if I'm not intending it to be that way, if our only interactions are demands or requests, then our kids don't see that we see them for who they are and that we want to connect with them just as humans, not just as finish this task, complete this thing. So those are some very, very small ways that families can connect. And I've found that the more that families focus on this, we call it positive interactions, the more that families focus on these positive, tiny, tiny interactions, the more connected they feel and the more trust they have when it comes to a big situation or a big challenge that they need to talk through and come up with a solution for.
I love how you said that because I know I talk a lot about what you say, right when you see your child after school is going to set the tone. So those first few sentences when they get in the car or when you see them, keeping it, how are you? Something general instead of like, how'd the test go? Or did you do this? Or did you forget that? I love that you kind of pointed that out. One of the tips that helped me as a parent was just being aware of my own emotional state, and where I was, because I know so often if I felt like I was stressed or just exhausted, I tried to be more alert of my reactions so that I knew I would have more of a tendency to emotionally react, right? Many parents have their own mental health issues or ADHD. And so not only are you trying to support your child, but you're also navigating your own. And so sometimes just really tapping into where you are and knowing that it's okay sometimes not to address an issue in the moment or not to say anything. And even if you're trying to follow like some kind of routine or structure, if you're not okay in that moment or you feel like you need a break, that comes first, right?
100%.
And so I love how you've really emphasized that today of just, finding the calm in the chaos, because I think it's so important. We talk a lot about that, and every child's different. Every child's going to have different needs. You may be able to go on autopilot with two of your kids, and one child might need something different. And that's not a parent's fault. That's just kind of figuring out what each child needs.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to think of the framework and this roadmap as guide rails. So you're going to be able to parent each kid uniquely, but you at least have these guides to come back to and say, okay, what are my thoughts like? How connected are we right now? Do I really understand what's going on? How can I be more curious about what's under the surface here? And then do we really have a plan that's working or do we need to tweak this plan? If I think of those 4 questions, anytime I've got a challenge in my family, it becomes a lot easier to move forward and solve it and stay connected through it.
Definitely. And I think it's finding those connections. Curious, as an author, out of the 3 books you have written, which book have you enjoyed writing the most?
So enjoyed writing the most, I would have to say was the second book, The Super Kids Activity Guide to Conquering Every Day, because it was just fun. It's activities that you do with your kids. There's a train your adult section that tells kids how to explain why they do what they do to their grownups. That book was really, really fun to write. Plus I did it with my kids. So their photos are throughout the book and they help me create a lot of the crafts and the projects in the book. My favorite book though, like if someone was asking me, all right, you've got 3 books, which one should I read first? It definitely is Calm the Chaos, because it is that roadmap of if you're, and it takes you step by step. And, someone described it the other day as like 20 habits for parents, because there's 5 stages, there's 4 steps in each stage. And there are these teeny tiny little things you can do that build connection, build your calm, build understanding, build resilience, and build that relationship as a family. And then from there, you can dive deeper into one of the other books.
Okay. What was your first book? Can you let our listeners know?
Yeah, the first book was Sensory Processing 101. So that book was written from me as a parent and educator, my understanding of sensory processing as I was unraveling that and discovering the different senses. And then it was co-written by a OT-PT group, and they wrote it from the therapeutic perspective.
Oh, wow. Well, listeners, we will have all of Dayna's contact information with Lemon Lime for her website. All of that will be in the description of this episode, so please check that out. Well, Dayna, we are wrapping up and we are to the end, and we have 3 questions for you.
Okay.
Are we ready?
I am.
Okay, so you can answer 1, you can answer 2, or you can answer all 3. It's up to you. We ask every guest these 3 questions. Number 1, what did you do as a child or teenager that would drive your parents crazy? Mm-hmm. Number 2.
Do we have all day? Like how long do you want me to answer that question?
Number 2, what is the biggest difference between children and teenagers today and when you grew up? And then number 3, what does successful parenting mean to you? Take it away. What do you think?
Okay, so the first one, seriously, we would be here all day. I will just say that I was extremely challenging for my mother. I'm an achiever. I'm someone who on the outside, everyone saw me doing all the things, but behind the scenes, my mom and I had an extremely volatile relationship. So I did everything to drive her crazy, which is why I think I understand kids so well. I always joke that I am a 12-year-old boy just grown up in a female body. I don't really understand that, but even my daughter tells me that. She's like, Mom, you're such a 12-year-old boy. Like, I know.
I get told that too. I have a 13-year-old grandson, and my daughter and son-in-law are like, oh, when you're with him sometimes, I don't know who is leading this duo because the two of you together.
Yeah, I had a coaching call with someone the other day, and they said, well, I don't know, what would you do if your child was talking potty talk? And I'm like, well, I might join them.
And I would laugh.
And then the biggest difference, I think, between teenagers and children today and when we grew up is, I think there's a couple of things. Honestly, I think it's access in a good way and a bad way. I think that children have access to so many things that we didn't quite have access to in the same way that they do. So they're getting inundated with all sorts of things from all different angles and having to learn about things from and try to make sense of that on their own. The other thing is now parents have access to so much more. And so parents know more, but then are more overwhelmed and more stressed out. What do I do? What shouldn't I do? Where my mom just used to say, leave the house, don't come back till it's dinner time. But then I went and got into all kinds of trouble while I was gone. She just didn't know about it. And so, it's not that like we weren't getting into mischief, and it's not that we weren't doing things. It's just sometimes I don't know if our parents knew about it. And then what does successful parenting mean to me? Honestly, I think this is one of the questions that I get asked all the time, or not asked, but I hear parents all the time say, I think I'm failing as a parent. And my number one goal is I want every parent to know that you are doing the absolute best with what you've been given. And so are there some small tweaks you could make? Can we always learn and do better? Yes, but you are exactly the parent that your child needs, especially if you're listening to something like this. If you're reading, if you're learning, if you're seeking out help, you are already a successful parent. You are doing an amazing job, and lean into that and accept that, because the more that you push against it, you're spending all that energy fighting against, I'm not a good parent, when you could be putting that energy towards the parenting and the connection with your kid.
Yes, I love it. I always say to parents, and Jackie and I say this, you are the expert. Mm-hmm. You are going to help me to help you and really to empower them. I love it. This conversation has been fun. It has been informative. Thank you so much for being a part of it with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, and I think our listeners are going to be excited about the book, and I'm excited to share it because I think so many parents can benefit from this resource. And I love how you're so honest and candid about your own experiences. And, I think that's what really helps parents to know we're all in it together. And we all struggle at different points. We all make mistakes, but that's just part of the journey, and that's to be expected, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yes. Well, thank you, Dayna. Listeners, the information will be in the notes today. And remember, you can interact with us on the Spotify app. We'd love to hear from you. What does successful parenting mean to you? I think we are finished. What do you think, Jackie?
I agree. Thank you so much. This was awesome.
It was. Thanks, Dayna.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing.
Yes. Goodbye. Bye, Jackie.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us. And make sure to subscribe and like us to catch our next episode, where we will take you on a journey to find new ways of successful parenting.